Hello and welcome to the DM's Travel Book Club, a guide to the planes, where each episode we discuss a different plane of existence as outlined in the Great Wheel Cosmology in the role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
We have come full circle, Fiona, all the
amazing.
way round and not completely in a circle because the way that we've laid them out has been we've got a flip-flopped and up, round,
We've
and
been
everywhere.
plane hopping a little bit, yeah.
Plane hopping, but we have now done all of the 16 planes of existence outside of the sort of central ones in the outer planes as they're known.
Mm-hmm.
There are still inner planes to do if you want to go there. We haven't got that far.
Well, hang on. Well, let's finish this. We've come such a long way.
I know, we have, haven't we?
I can't believe it. When we started this, I was like, okay, so we've got planes of law, planes of chaos, and now conflict. And then, as I said to you, I was like, okay, we've got the boring ones last, and it turns out not at all.
Not at all.
No. And what a one to end on after finishing in the sort of loveliness of Elysium, pure good. And then at the end of last session, we were like, okay, ending on a low note, despair.
Yeah.
But Hamilton, where are we on our final stop?
We are in the endless despair of the Grey Wastes. Grey Waste is not. I thought I'd always put it with an S at the end, but it isn't.
Yeah.
But it could be further from boring, and has some of the coolest gothic horrorness that you could
cool.
add to a campaign. It is. Yeah. You thought Hades was cool in Hercules? He's cool in this.
It's so cool in this. And that's a good thing to just differentiate right at the beginning, is that in 5th edition, it is just known as Hades, and not the Grey Waste. And I feel that is a very...
It used to be just called Hades as well in the old
That's
editions.
right. You did say that. Yeah, so they've reverted back to it. I actually prefer the name Grey Waste, because I think it defines it basically what it is, and I just think there's so much to it. It's certainly in that first initial beginning bit where it talks about it and this idea that this is the most evilest of planes, but you don't know what evil is per se. We've always got this version of what we think evil is. Oh, it's evil deeds of people being killed and murdered and all that sort of thing. And the way it describes it is like that's not this plane at all. So it's almost like unsuspecting of what happens, and then the true nature of the plane is revealed, and you're like, oh, that is evil. And I just was like hooked in instantly.
100%. And I think all the descriptions I've literally written here, oh my gosh, I love this description, oh my gosh, I love this description, oh my gosh, the descriptions here are awesome, cool, such cool description. And I'm like it literally, all of it is just like it's dripping with atmosphere, as they would say. It's
and
just,
some great descriptions as well.
100%. It's it's so cool, even though it is a land of endless despair and people and colorless, it kind of like the whole sense of this sort of like the major factor on it that we'll come and talk about more of it sort of seeping the life and desire and hope from people, even though it's that, but because of that it's so emotive, the language, that that it's kind of hard not to like enjoy reading about it, really, as much as you don't want to go there. But also you can see loads of players going, oh heck, I want to
go there, absolutely. Well, I have a very small story to tell you, which I think just because it reminded me of it, because I only got told about this like a couple of years ago. But when I was like in kindergarten, or whatever it is you call it in general, I call it kindergarten, but like preschool, so just before you're going into like your first year at school as a 3 or 4 year old, whatever, we had parents' evening where the parents come and talk to your teachers about how you're doing and stuff. So my parents went, and of course the teacher was like, well, Fiona's doing really well, she's getting on with everyone, but there's a little bit of an issue. And they were like, oh, what is it? And she just leant in and she went, she doesn't have the concept of the colour grey. And my mum was like, oh, that's amazing, because she just sees things full of life and loveliness, and what a great aspect. And my dad was like, this is the worst thing in the world. And so for weeks afterwards, he was pointing out every single grey-coloured thing. And I feel now that maybe my life was a lot brighter, and maybe I'm just seeing things in shades of grey now as a result of my dad.
Your father ruined the innocence you had, that it was just light, and everything grey was just a shade of a different colour that has been desaturated. It was a greeny grey. It wasn't just grey.
Exactly.
But now it's just grey.
As obviously we laugh about it, but now I always wonder, like, what would have life been if I hadn't? So this is what I think the Grey Waste is, because it's such a subtle change. I mean, obviously, as soon as you get there, everything is great, right? But the fact is, like, your colours and stuff start to be muted and start to go. I was like,
most vibrant first, and then the least vibrant, least less. Yeah, no, I it's so. Yeah, it's really evocative. I thought, though, I must admit, when you were saying you got to parents' evening and they got called in, is thinking Fiona's drawings, pictures of like ghouls and vampires, and yeah, exactly. She's like in the corner like Wednesday Addams. That's what I was imagining.
Oh man, I should dress up as Wednesday Addams because she definitely is like a proper soulmate or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry,
but then this idea that these colours, obviously, they draw people. It's similar to how we were talking about that fire and like I think it was pandemonium, so like where your magical fire is actually, it draws people's attention. Colour draws people's attention. So this idea that people, denizens of the plane, will go and tear off your clothing and bury it as if it's something
they literally
sacrilegious.
Find it abhorrent, don't they? Yeah,
you get headaches when you look at it. Like, great,
those
I
that
love
have been
that.
there long enough. So yeah, maybe we should talk about the sort of. I mean, we've talked. It kind of. All of this encompasses all of the geography as well as the population are all sort of merged into one because of its sort of like inherent nature of this. The sort of physicality of the plane is greyness and lacking colour. There are moments of colour though which are interesting in their own right, but that is the perpetualness. There's no hillocks of fields of green grass and stuff like that. And no more. Good. No more. But there are still hills and trees and rivers, but they're not the fun. They're not the nice, colourful kind. It has 3 planes, has layers. Sorry, to this plane. The first being Oinos, I think is how
I definitely was going oiknus, and I was like, "There's no K, Fiona. Don't try and be like that."
Also known as the 3 glooms because they're all gloomy.
Yeah, I just felt like compared to other planes, which doesn't necessarily refer to their layers, I thought, instantly you get such a different vibe, and each of the layers, even though they have this nature to them, are subtly very different or defining features. Which, as you were saying, like Oinos, I mean, we did mention it a little bit in the previous session. At the end, it is the battlefield, the where the war is held for the Blood War.
Yeah, it is the Blood Wars. Yeah, it is the battleground, and it is the sounds of claws clashing, weapons rending, and the screams of the dying echo across the layer. Even in a time of compassionate calm, the moans of the wounded fill the air. Sounds nice. It's festered with the stench of death and disease. It's full of. You have a 10% chance of suffering from a malady called the wasting sickness, which drains 1 point from strength, constitution, dexterity, and charisma a day until all 4 stats reach 0, and then you die unless you cure disease. And that's just because there's so much death because of this endless battle between the Tanari and the Betezu, which are the demons and the devils, overseen by the Yugoloths, who really, as I'm learning through this, are basically controlling the lower planes and are just playing games. And this is just them. They are literally they are just playing their Warhammer forever on this with these evil kin.
Absolutely.
And it is pretty much it sounds pretty much desert like. It's very much got bluffs and mountains, but it's mainly just like this rocky to dusty dust dunes of filled with dying beings, which is not exactly great. So that's the top layer. Lovely place to visit.
Lovely place.
We'll talk about some of the parts of these planes and we'll go back to the detail. But then the next plane down is Niflheim.
I think the fame. If you know your Norse mythology, you will know this name pronunciation better than us.
Or if you've seen the crappiest Thor, we've been there, but not in a good way. Oh come on, the Dark World is easily the shittest.
I mean,
Thor,
I don't know. Love and Thunder was a bit.
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
But
yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
Is it worse than Dark World?
That's for a different podcast. I'm not going to tell you anything on that.
Controversial. Right. So that is that though is like what I see. That is it's a verdant primer. Well, it says it's a verdant primer that is still completely grey. But I just see it as like misty sort of pictures of Norway, with the fir trees. But you take the DSAT, you put it in black and white, and it's kind of a little bit like The Thing as well. Mixed with that.
That's what I got. The sort of The Thing, the Stephen King's The Mist. That idea that the fog is so thick you can't see. It's only within 100 feet.
100 feet, is that right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So obviously Mistal combat, any range combat, is a bit pointless. You have to go up. So, and I've definitely, if you've ever been to, say, St Andrews or any cities on the coast in the UK, when you have that the fog come in, that's what it feels like. It feels very oppressive. So you can make out shapes, and then suddenly something will come out, usually like a dire wolf or something, to come and track you down, and you're just like, oh. So it's very atmospheric.
Obviously not in St Andrews.
Dire
wolves do come out in St Andrews.
Well, a very small story from me again. So when I studied there, I used to walk home very late at night because it was a fairly safe town. But one night it was so dark. Oh no, one morning, because I had an all-nighter, I was walking back and and I just had a runner come out of nowhere in front of me and shouted "Good morning," because everyone's very nice. I was like, oh! Again, very tall, athletic man running towards me, and then obviously dodging out of it. Very much Get Out style. I was like, oh man. So it can be quite scary, and what a great way to do encounters and stuff like that.
100%. This sort of sense of dread that's always there.
Yes.
I think it's and it has it definitely feels Nordic, obviously because of the connotation, but it does also mention its relationship to like both Aboria. I feel like it's like and to Isgard, because it's got the sort of evil or death pantheons of those.
Hell in it.
There's a hell's there, and
the Celtic god as well.
Aaron.
Yeah,
which is the Celtic
Aaron,
god.
Yes, the Celtic god of death.
God of death as well.
Again, fascinating when we'll talk about their realm. Yeah. Oh, scary. Yes. I love it. Yeah.
No,
very much the reflection of Hades and Persephone, which is obviously in the third plane.
Yes, exactly. And really, really interesting. We'll talk about their realms in more detail again. And then third and final layer is, I'm just finding the name so I can definitely say, which is Hades, of course. Hades, or the underworld, which basically has Hades in it, as well as Ea, which we'll talk about, which is the so some more Greek goddess, Hecate.
I don't know. It's again. Again, if you're a part of those pantheons, or you know a lot more about it, then you would get these pronunciations right. But again, if you've read any of them in school, or if that's something that you're fascinated, then you have all those stories about like Scythius.
Oh, it's known as Pluton. Sorry, it's Pluton.
Pluton.
Yeah, that's why I need to double check, because
Pluton. The sort of Pluto.
Olympian's gloom.
Oh, great.
It says it's the third layer of the Grey Waste seems much like the other two in its gloomy feel. Mount Lewis's lowest caverns empty out here, but the layer resembles a subtropical climb on a prime world, dotted with willows, olive trees, and poplars, but all show the signs of dying for the lack of care and love.
Whoa.
But then they've been dying for eons now. Any druid here feels the sadness of the trees as they recognise their mortality and the lack of love given to them.
So, and that's an interesting thing, because they talk about these trees quite often, both in the second and third layers. That there's a rumour that they are actually the sort of reincarnated spirits of dead petitioners. And there was just a throwaway line, certainly I think it's in the second one, when it talks about the Death of Innocence town, where it's the small little town that's surrounded by these trees, and they're like, there's this rumour that the spirits of the citizens or denizens of the plane are incorporated into these trees, and there's no truth to it, or no sort of proof to it, except when you cut the trees down and you burn them, they make a strange smell and a strange sound, and you're like, ooh, nope. I'm going to be cold, thank you. That's fine.
100%.
The only thing I wanted to quickly mention in terms of like just looking at the overall thing before diving into the layers a little bit. So they have two other things they talk about the plane overall in the Little Adventurers primer. They talk about, which is the Lodestones of Misery, which is what a cracking title.
There's some cracking titles throughout this.
Oh, you know what? I think this plane has some of the best like evocative names, and instantly you're like, what does that mean? But yes, the Lodestones of Misery, these obelisks that just stand there, and there's one on each of the planes, but there could be more. This idea is massive, and it just draws in this what you think is the emotions and stuff that's draining people, and if it flashes certain colours, then obviously it affects the individual. And it's just, what are they there for? Is it actually sucking in? Is it what's like collecting the draining thing? Is it being used by some big power beyond like the entities that are here? And you're just like, oh, very cool.
So cool. Talking about great names, then I just want to run through a couple that I've highlighted here on this. So you've got Glitter Hell, which we'll talk about. Crystal Spire, formerly known as the Bone Castle. You've got the Palace of Loss, the Shadow Keep.
Yeah, by two of the deities, yeah.
Yeah, you've got the Queen of Darkness lives there. You've got the Fortress of Disease.
I know.
I mean, there's the Wasting Tower. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, they are just... that's just a few. That is to name a few. They were just even more of them. But just like every single one, you're like, oh, this is a 15-year-old goth kid's like dream naming, like band.
I literally was about to say, like, I think the inner goth
tower.
Yeah. The inner goth in me was like, yes. Yeah. And you can imagine, again, I can imagine putting up together a playlist to play for this. Like, we're going into battle. I know. let's do.
Battle is very like, da da da. Is Battle of the Fates. Whilst this is very much like droning, sort of like, and then like with super electric guitars over the top of it.
I feel like also like going back to I'm going to say its name wrong now. Onion. Sorry, not onion. Oinos. There you go. Ointness or onos.
Onion. Let's call it onion.
Because I feel like sometimes maybe like, is it like a battlefield like Archaron is? But this is so different. I think Archaron is just constantly. I mean, they're both battlefields that are constantly happening. But this is where I think with the gloom and stuff, like, and it just feels like the sadness and stuff like that. Whereas they're resigned to the fate that they're constantly going to battle. Whereas there's sort of like, we're going to battle. There's more of a, I don't know. I see that
I feel like Archaron is like a bit Isgardian, that there's a sort of, but it's a lust for battle. So the battle will be like passionate and like raw and sort of like very much like a bit more a little bit more like choreographed, if you know what I mean, and sort of charging of like armored people. Whilst I can imagine the battlefield there is probably like ogres ripping heads off and bones being crushed and people being eaten, and like very content warning heavy body horror battle, not fighting with swords, but fighting with hands and teeth and claws and anything that's available to you, and torturous to a certain extent. So it's kind of different. It's just going to be horrendous. Basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then at the center of where it's because this is the thing it talks about, these layers, these of the plane, they're not like, as again I always think of it as a layer cake, but it's actually they're more like just they also intersect, like almost like a pie. And you talk about this, that it's just called the town at the center, which again compared to previous.
What's the tower called?
There's
a tower that shines a light, isn't there? Oh, I've forgotten it.
Is that in the second layer you're talking about?
Yes. Oh, that is probably, and that's what I'm getting. Yeah,
that's fine.
I forgot. There's so many cool names. I've forgotten if it's one of them. Yeah. But anyway, yes, keep going.
So it talks about this town as almost like a pastry. This idea of like it just sort of folds in on itself, etc. And then you have the three layers intersecting, and at the center of it is a castle that's run by somebody called, I think he's called Dandy Will or Will Dandy or something. Dandy Will, who's this like pale tiefling, and everything. Basically, you can see in the town itself where the planes sort of meet. The one for the first layer is walled off completely because they don't want the spread of disease to get into the other towns, so everything's purely guarded. They use this town as a way to go through to the other things, so it's constantly like, it has got people there. And then at the end it talks about like, if you're using this castle as a way to get through people, but you don't seem to be affected by the sickness, by this draining
disease,
the wasting disease. The draining of the planes.
Draining of colour,
or of your dreams, which we'll come to in a second. And they says, like, why do you think that is? Is there some purpose? What is the motivation to this town? Maybe it's subtly draining you as you're passing through these doorways and these gates. And I was like, like a little tax on something that you lose, like your passion for like making
and you don't even know.
And you don't even know because it's so horrible. Subtle, and it's just slowly taken away from you.
But that's the. We should then talk about the overall effect then of this playing, because it is, we've mentioned it but we haven't gone fully into it, but the overall overarching sort of element that defines what this is, which is which is called the term it's just called the gloom, isn't it? Is that what it is?
I think so. I definitely don't know if there's a naming for it per se, or at least I couldn't see one straight away through the reading.
And the bleaching is also a term, which is, but it's sort of because it just, but it's the base, the vibrancy of, or as we said, we talked about the colours, but this dreaming thing you mentioned as well, is that when you're there, you dream intense dreams, and at first it's pleasurable, they say, because they're sort of all your best and happiest dreams, and you realize slowly that those are your memories and your hopes and desires being drained away from you as you dream them and sucked into the void of the waste until you lose all sense of self and desire or need, and you get to this point that you when you finally lose everything. At first it's called, I've got so many things I've actually highlighted so much because I've loved it.
The whole page.
Lost his dream complete, has no longer decided to leave through it. He loses sight of their own identity and vanishes into the enchanted regions of plane to shed his mortal guise. The last anyone sees of them is a body trundling off into the distance. And it's just like, and there are good people who go and try and find these people who have got lost in the waste, to try and draw them out and bring them back out of the grey waste to a prime world so that they can recover. Because some people have gone there because they're evil beings who have died and have been like selfish, or generally it's about self-worth, or have done nothing with their lives, have been so like there's a lot of like waste of life as much as anything, as well as being selfish. But some of them are people who are adventurers who have just succumbed to this, and so people wish to go and save them. It's sort of,
it's kind of but what a great adventure hook. Again, you need to go find somebody. I mean, all of this, it usually the adventure hook is like, we need to go get our friend who's lost there, or return to life in some way, certainly if you're going to the other two layers. But there's something about the way it describes it, that these are so vivid dreams when you get there, that you can hear in them, you can smell in them, and then slowly as it sucks that away, it sucks your imagination, your creativity, and you just lose that. That's the thing I sometimes struggled with, I think, because I was like, well, evil must have a purpose, which obviously is more apparent on other planes, but it's the apathy that fills people, and that's what it talks about as it being truly evil. And I was like, wow, because that's the thing, it's not about you being apathetic, because we can all be apathetic. It's the idea that you have been made apathetic, and it's just taking it away from you without care, and that's so brutal. It
is. And that apathy then leads to the other sort of magical condition, which is movement around. You need to get anywhere on the Grey Waste outside of Power's realm, a body has to learn the trick of not concentrating on their destination. Only the lack of desire or care to reach a place allows a body to make much progress. You move about 10 times faster than if you are intent on reaching that point. Which makes that sort of, I want to save my loved one from the pit of hell, like from Hades or from Nilfhelm. Your intention makes it harder for you to get there. Which is so evil. Which is the evilness of it.
That's definitely a trope in like classic Greek and Norse like mythology stories, where you just like, you can't have a purpose, you've got to shed everything in order to get there, but at what cost to yourself?
But like, what dreams may come. Which is just so cool. That movie, the ending of that movie, though, I cry every time. And it's got Robin Williams, so I'm just generally crying.
That's it's such a sad film. Highly recommended on that front. But it's the thing, this whole plane, the Grey Waste, is not a prison plane compared to Carceri at all, right? It's just, just as soon as you're there and you're drained of it takes 1d6 months. Well,
it is a prison by its magical condition. Like, unlike Carceri, where you cannot get out because there are no ways out unless you can find the one way out, and there are people guarding you. This one, it just physically drains your desire to leave, and not because it takes away, because it charms you, because it just bleeds it from you.
What I quite like as well, there's a bit of a throwaway thing talking about some population in a way. This idea that the petitioners, they are lifeless, and they are almost like they're this great line of, they are touched to their very spirits by sheer apathy and sadness of the plane. They are sort of almost like greyish ghosts, and a crowd, and they will go and crowd the never dead, those adventurers who are they have like hope clustered in their breast of every living person. So they're like moths to a flame, and so you could be surrounded by these creatures, like hands out trying to reach you and all that sort of thing, until you become one of them.
That's sort of like
very zombie-like.
Exactly. Also, it reminds me of Severance in beginning. There's a beginning of that program Severance, in the thing they got loads of CG hands grabbing someone. It reminds me of that. it also says a few things about it, which is like the beings remember the Watcher of the Grey Waste. There is no cause and effect. Things happen because they must. The native subscribe to this belief, and all they do their best to influence what must happen in a fashion that benefits them most of all.
Absolutely.
Can I also say this is the first time, and this is a problem with D&D that we have, and we can talk about this probably for a bigger discussion, and we don't have to get in. But the best advice for dealing with the foes in this gloom: avoid judging them as a group. They're individuals, and they will individually surprise a body. Sometimes for the better, sometimes far more often than not. It's not, but that is the first time I have seen a D&D book mention a group of people as individuals, and that is actually something to be
groundbreaking. Absolutely. No, I noted that down too. Yeah,
because I was like, at freaking last. It took, well, I mean, in the 90s, but like, it's the only time I've ever seen it being like, hey, we're not going to define people as a group here. And this is a chance, which is kind of just it's an aside to the Great Waste. I just thought it was interesting from
I guess again, it could be really cool to have that as like, oh, you're going to go there, but be aware of these groups because they'll sub you, and that you actually stumble across people, and that's almost that sense of pity, perhaps, that you come across people that you judged, and then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have judged them like this, etc. And I just think that's such a, again, I don't want to be like teachable moment, because that's not the thing, but like as a role playing thing, it makes you realize your own biases. As a player. So I think that's awesome.
That was interesting. The power. So that's the sort of proxy, the sort of petitioner. Sorry, the powers that are there. We mentioned a few already. We've got, but we've some interesting ones that we haven't. So there's the rotting Yurtress of the orcs.
Ooh, what a name!
Yeah, what a name. Panzuriel, which is a sea-confined, scaly being. I didn't say much more about them, so I don't know.
I don't know, because these are sort of various non-human powers again.
Yeah, exactly.
Like on there. Yeah, a lot of these are like death, disease, and despair. That's sort of their region and domain. So
exactly.
That's where
There's
you get them from.
Power of the Hags. There is Abathor the Greedy, a dwarven power who lives in Glitterhell. I love Glitterhell, by the way.
Yeah,
it's so
we'll have
cool.
to talk about it because it's so
We'll definitely
cool.
have to talk about.
Yeah.
There's Cyric is someone that I've come across in the D&D world. But I can't remember their term, but there's them. They live in the Bone Castle, the city Crystal Spire used to be the Bone Castle, and then also, as we mentioned, there's Hades, there's Hell, Hecate. There's Ratri, the Queen of Darkness, and then for your Kryn fans, there's Morgion, who is. If you're a Kryn fan, if you lance dragons, that's for you.
I hear that's gonna be a really big thing.
I hear that's gonna be a big thing. I love that alt cover, by the way. I looked at it again the other day and I was like, oh, this is so.
I mean, I didn't know much about Lord Soth, and now I am pretty much a big Lord Soth fan.
Of course, you're a baddie fan.
Yeah,
I haven't heard anything about them yet, but
I'll send you the links because I have a
yeah. And then the cool thing is the Wasting Tower, which we will talk about later as well, where there's the Ultraloth lives, and there used to be Anthraxus.
Yes. Who's been tossed out, right? He's no longer part of it. Yeah,
which is quite a cool, and he's wandering looking for a job basically with all the other powers, but he's a power unto themselves, and I think that's kind of I mean, there's so many things in here that are just like that you could make a campaign from, or just an adventure from. It's just
there's a lot of inspiration to take from, and especially because we've not mentioned the general sort of the three most common natives that you will come across.
That's what we're going to get to,
yeah. So let's talk about larvae and how horrific they are. And I've heard of them before, again, from seeing stuff, because it seems to be a proper feature throughout the lower planes. Anyway, this idea
they're in hells as well. They're sort of like, it's a thing that's like the lowest of the sort of, and they're traded like as
currency, horrible thing. But this idea that they have spirits of selfish morsels or unfortunate victims of the night hags. They're just turned into these worm-like horrific beings with a human face, which is, I'm like, I'm good. No,
that's what they think you might turn into when you get completely succumbed to the grey wasteness as well, which is kind of awful. You've obviously got some Tenari and Batezu around. It is the original home of the Yugoloths, which, as we mentioned when we were talking about to Gehenna, they are sort of, that's where they now are mainly at, but obviously this is their home. But the other things aren't because of there's the nightmares, and which are those cool flaming horses.
The goth horses. Yes.
Goth horses.
Yes.
I'm reading a book series called The Dwarves, and I don't know if you've heard about it by Michael Hines. I forgot his name. It's actually quite good. But in it, they have these very nightmare-like creatures who are horses that eat people, and they are pretty disgusting. And it's pretty. The description of it is pretty. It's clearly a D&D campaign made into a book, and it's very interesting. But yeah, it has exactly.
And they again later on they have a very cool like death site. And,
yes.
I'm like yes.
Cool, yeah, exactly. Another really cool
horses.
Thing.
Skeleton horses.
Skeleton flame horses.
Oh,
yeah, literally, they should be on the front cover of a Iron Maiden album.
Yeah. My Little Pony, I don't think so, you know.
No. Jesus Christ, yeah, they are the antithesis of, and therefore super cool.
Super cool, absolutely. You've got Hordlings as well, this misshapen,
yes, that's the one.
bastardized children of the Grey Waste. It's the first time I've ever seen the word bastardized in a D&D book. I recently saw the word piss in a D&D book, and I was like, whoa, is this allowed? I know. But yes, this idea that the petitioners, their forms, again, the rumour is they've been twisted beyond recognition by the evil of the plane and their own twisted sense of self. So again, if you're not a larvae, you're more likely to become one of these creatures. And it just talks about this idea that there's so many of these Hordlings everywhere, and it's just frightening to realise how many souls have dedicated their lives to the pursuit of evil.
Yes.
I've
copied that. It's frightening. I've literally copied that line. I was like, I mean, that's the problem with the world, as we all know, and in the D&D world, unfortunately, as well.
You don't know which of your friends are Hordlings. That's just all I'm saying, You could be a Hordling. You could be a Hordling,
You're a Hordling. You're a Hordling.
Everyone's a Hordling.
You, and me.
Is that better than a larvae? Who knows,
Exactly. Makes you wonder why anyone would be evil in this world, wouldn't you? If this was the reality of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The factions do hang out here. It does mention as well. We talk about factions on DM's Bookclub. One of the first ones. The first thing I ever did with you on the DM's Bookclub.
Sorry, I get excited every time I see that on the show.
And then. Yeah, and so there's the Bleak Cabal, not surprisingly, because they are the extremists who believe that everything will go and decay to nothingness. And you've also got the Dustmen, who also don't believe that death is the real death. They're always looking for the true death. So a place where there's the gods of death is going to be interesting to them. And then there's also the anarchists who are also infiltrating all the other places. They go there to try and quickly and easily learn how to become apathetic, which I love as an idea. It's like training for an anarchist to infiltrate the apathy group. They go, well, go there and you'll just become apathetic, then come back and then infiltrate.
Yeah, and then it's fine. Yeah. Wow, what a placement,
That is exactly. Oh, could I not go with the other ones? No,
yeah,
that's the one
I'm sure I can find out. Yeah, and then finally you have the Night Hags, which is another DM's book club we did together, one of the early ones. This idea of hags in general are fucking amazing, but here this idea that on this plane, and I'm sure on other planes as well, they have the ability to change you into larvae. And it's just this description we're using, like their familiars and the nightmares stuff. They just the way they herd larvae, like almost like sheep,
like
dog.
cattle.
Yeah. And I was just imagining like you seeing them roaming. These like come on, and they're like these horrible larvae just crawling everywhere, just as they're on nightmares and just like you said, herding cattle across the Wild West, or as I was like sheepdog herding in Wales.
Well, the front page image of it is this. I shared it earlier. Is a hag like whipping some larvae that are just like grazing on some grass. It's like weird. I'm not a fan.
But what a cool random encounter you could have if you're trying to get somewhere and you just if you don't know much about it, you're like, what the fuck is happening?
It's really I mean, can I say, I literally on the same page that we're on right now, I've got a WTF. Like, what the fuck? Seriously? I don't even want to. There are some things in there that, again, when you're reading this, you do read this. There are some which are just like I don't even want to mention. You'll probably know who I'm talking about. They're named after a Marvel character. You might know what I'm talking about. I just went no. No, thank you. No, thank you. Seriously, we can just skip over that. But anyway, if you do start seeing something about a Marvel character, then just move on.
Yes,
I suggest.
absolutely.
And
again, we've said this for every single one where there might be difficult topics. Have that session 1 with your players, or session 0, sorry, and I say like, hey, if you're going to Grey Waste, there's some things you will know about if you do some research or anything like that. It's bad, so. We'll do safety tools, etc. So it is worth having that chat, because it is so. Sometimes you're like, because like I know we're very excited about it, because we're like, oh, what a cool story device, but ultimately it's like, this is awful.
This is also really fucked up. Some of them, that one particularly, I'm like, this is not cool. This is actually kind of disgusting, and we'll move on from that one. And I would ignore that in my game. But I think it's worth noting for people that when you walk into these things, we also brush over a few things we don't talk about.
Absolutely.
And it's always worth being aware that there are things in this that are not cool. And so you just gotta that's the thing with this, and particularly with the evil planes, particularly because of their nature, unfortunately.
So shall we then talk about the 3 layers in a little bit more detail? So let's talk about the first layer, sort of the battle plane, as it were. As we sort of talked about before, it never sees peace across the layer. Battlefields with the biggest armies in the cosmos. But let's zoom in a little bit and let's talk about Glitter Hell, because
AKA for people who know this, Galt's Gulch. Rand readers out there that got forced to read that at school. Here you go. Greed is good. Keeps the body alive.
This idea of, is it Abathor, the dwarven god of all greed and miserliness. And I just, again, we've done an episode on dwarves and Duragar before, and about how their big motivator is that, it is striving for quality and goodness, whereas again, Duragar have always been described as always quantity over quality, and this is almost like the epitome of quantity is more important here. And it's just, I love this description of this god saying, regards any physical treasure that enters his domain as his, even if it's in somebody else's pockets.
Exactly. I've noticed that, so I love that.
I just love that. Go, oh, that's mine now. And this idea of like, as soon as you're there, it's taken from you, and obviously,
the Eye of Sauron looks at you and is like, I want it.
And this idea, redoubt the village that's there. Like again, it just feels like there's nothing that's bought here or sold here, because all the jink, all the treasures of the god keeps himself. So it's all about bartering systems, and this idea that you always think the other half's got a better offer, even though it's probably nothing, and so you'll come to blows over like a tiny detail. So what a great little role-playing thing,
and how everything is made shonkily and like not well enough, because if it's made too good, then you desire it, therefore Abathor desires it, and therefore he takes it from you. So you have to have things that you don't want, so you exist in this world of like in a grey waste with grey and dull and depressing things, because if it is of worth, it gets taken from you. So like, how awful is that? And I literally wrote, though, when it talks about description, I was like, sounds like a challenge for player characters, doesn't it? It's like the Glitter Hell cavern is complex and deep, is in a cavern complex deep in Oinos. It's hidden from prying eyes of man and dwarf alike, and no fiends dare cross the god's wrath. Dare the god's wrath by crossing the threshold, because anyone who sort of appears particularly into their fortress and lair where they keep all their gold, they immediately think you're a thief if you're not like a proxy of them or them themselves. And so there are caverns, but they're all fakes that lead to trapped caverns which collapse on intruders or dump them into a pit of vipers or boil them in acid. It doesn't want it, so but you just think, but it's filled with gems and gold and all the good stuff, and you just think, inside is a quintuply locked magical warded vault in the very center of the hall, and it sits the fabled trove of Abathor. It contains all manners of treasure, from measly copper piece to the emerald throne bearing the bones of the last emperor of the Forbidden Dawn. Another cool name. Who's the last emperor of the Forbidden Dawn?
What a person. I want to meet them. They're dead.
In my mind, that sounds like that's the emperor from Warhammer, because that's like, like it's finally stole that from them. But it's like, what player you are going to want your players to want to have to enter Abathor's Hall, right? Because there's the only place you can find this ultimate gem or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like a proper heist or proper like almost like a Tomb Raider, Indiana Jones style, but just the lethality of it is just
it's going to be up. This is level 20.
I think the whole of the Grey Waste is a level 20 thing myself. Like, I know we talked about it before, like what level would things go? I think here, just because of, I think just emotionally, I think you want to get your players involved early on, maybe on a different plane, but yeah, the Grey Waste, you just think you need to have some sort of strong constitution or strong will to do this.
100%. The other one is even extra-dimensional magic, such as bags of holding or portable hole, are still fully visible to Abathur, so he can see through them. So even if you think, I'm going to chuck that in there, he's like, I can see that.
What's that there?
What's that you're holding
I'll
there?
take that.
Nothing.
Yeah.
It's mainly dead body parts, as we all know from most campaigns.
Most campaigns. Yeah, basically it is customs the realm, and you're like, that's mine, that's mine, that's mine. Let's go on to the Wasting Tower then. So yeah, as you talked about this idea of like the place where possibly Yugoloths have been created or born, and it's just described as like the flayed spine of some long dead entity,
the
presumably
first god who tried to cross the Yugoloths.
Whoa.
Fuck. And it's 20 miles high and 20 miles below ground.
But even then, on top of it, so you have this massive vertebrae, but then also you have towers coming off it. So for me, looking at it, it would be like a massive, horrible mushroom type thing. But then also underneath it has the same thing. So again, these roots and just, horrible. Just again, against the grey sky, this horrible sort of like, again, very goth, very metal, like spine. Very cool, and yeah, again, this idea that even in Yugoloths, I mean, we talked about them before, this idea of factions and stuff, and so they will play off against each other to try and get a bit more power in this thing, as well as come together to fight against a threat and stuff. And, and as you mentioned earlier, they have the power to control the disease on this first layer, and so they could just stop it, or depending on who has the mantle at the top. She's like,
the mantle as well. Oh my gosh! Is that what is it? The mantle
siege of maliciousness.
Yes, and once you wear it, you are ever changed by it to this like.
And that's all it says. That's all it says. You're like, how? What? Huh?
Yeah.
Like, you can't leave us like this. What? How?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, but you can just imagine it, can't you? Just imagine it's like this, like. Just imagining Darth Sidious, like just going completely wrinkled and like ultimate power.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So again, and there's a map of this as well. So again, you could like if you wanted to, if your players are going, let's have a go, because the map itself just shows what is knowledgeable or available to the players or to people that know about it. So you could easily add stuff to it yourself, and you're like, I don't know if I would want to go there. Oh no.
I mean, just don't give your players a choice. That's the trick.
Very true.
But that is the first layer. Second layer, Nilfgaard, so we mentioned, is the Northman's Despair, as it's known. It's so we mentioned briefly Anwen, which is the home of Aron.
I think.
Aron.
Basically, you could call it the Isle of the Cursed or the 10 Isles.
Yeah, the 10 Isles. I just think, have you seen those paintings, the Isle of Death? Famous, begins with Borsch, I think. I can't remember who it is. Begins with B. But anyway, it's a beautiful painting. I just imagine 10 of those islands, with these like little trees growing up and like this sort of like statues sort of like all hanging down, looking like, sort of, and everyone's sort of, all being moody, basically. But he's also it's not a necessarily like, not everyone in this realm, it's worth noting, is necessarily evil, particularly because in their realm particularly, it's people who have done good things in their life. All the Celtic beings who die, beings of that sort of belief system, come there. So those who are have done better with their lives and have done good deeds and have felt good about what they've done, they live close to the center where there is life and vitality and color. Whilst the ones on the edge are not only ones who haven't done anything in life, but ones who feel like they haven't done enough with their life either, which is actually quite sad. I find that really sad. Yeah. Because they might have actually done really well, and they're just like, I feel bad for the sort of like the meek.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I guess you gotta be like, oh, come on, believe in yourself. Come on, guys.
Yeah, you actually did a lot, so that's kind of unfair. But
so interesting. Yeah.
But Yeah, go on. Sorry, you say.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, like, again, there's this whole, again, it's just a throwaway sentence or a paragraph about this god, this entity as well, who has these endless vigils. So again, very similar to the glitter hell, that idea that like always knows what's going on in their realm. But they have this ruling at his side an unnamed mortal called the Queen of Anwen, who is a new person every 10 years because obviously they die or something happens to them, and so this person, again, possibly a session 0 thing if you're not keen on people just taking other people, goes and chooses the fairest maiden. I would put it as anyone that chooses the fantasy, and they are unwilling to come, but as soon as they're here, they're like, actually, I was always meant to be here, which is like, that's another playing thing in manipulation sort of thing, which again, for me, I'm like, that's so scary, and I relish that as a player and a DM, but I know that's not.
It kind of reminds me of Blackbeard's wife.
Yeah.
A little bit, and you're just like, this is I was reading that and just like, that is freaky. Another slightly like, it's so awful.
Yeah, absolutely. And the trip to this place as well is awful. Like, if for whatever reason, if you want to go there, again, it's very much like if oh my god, even I can't say it now. R1 says, like, if you don't want to, if he doesn't want you to come, you won't come. There'll be waves crushing your boats. Yeah. Random rocks will appear from nowhere.
Well, he doesn't want you to come there because it might be to save someone. He says he doesn't care. Anwen, despite his uncaring reputation, doesn't like to see Burks wasting their short lives on frivolity, like coming to save people from the dead. So that's why he makes it so hard. And you're like,
and that's a big thing, because there's this big cauldron in the town where if you put a body in for a day and a night, it comes back to life. But obviously, you need to have special permission to do that, and if you do it against the rules, you have the militia come for you. If a living person jumps in the cauldron, they die immediately, and that's it. And then the cauldron explodes or breaks apart and then reforms after a year. And so there's all these little things where you're like, oh, again, I can see people trying to get into this town, say, we must save this person, and the price is too much. But
or you get to Hades, take them from Hades, and then take them to this, because you know about the cauldron. So you're like...
The politics of that intersecting would be very interesting. Oh.
I think if you wanted to do something all over the shop, that's what you could do, because it seems like a real place to go.
And you were talking about a lighthouse earlier, this fortress of...
That's what it...
Again, I can't pronounce it at all, but basically it's
Anoeth. Yeah. Oh, this is a different one. Yeah, this is actually not the one I was thinking, but there is another one, but this one's cool. Yeah, this one's also
this mighty fortress of human bones on the shore, and at the top of it is a skull said to be the last ruler of this realm, which the god looks through the eyes, not only as a sort of general sort of looking around, but it can also be used as a lighthouse sort of thing. And what could you imagine? You're like, we're finally getting over the beach and stuff like that, and you see it, this horrific sight. You're like, what a lovely white castle.
They had they go to Skull Island. It looks like a duck, but I kind of love that. But it's I could just imagine this, like, it's very like Pirates of the Caribbean sort of ideas. These like big, and you kind of think what I like the little story of it there is the legend has the skull retains the intelligence and spirit of the old ruler, and he is still fiercely protective of his former realm, and he loves this new job even more. He still oversees the realm, but he has none of the administrative responsibilities. And I kind of like that he's like, you know what, this is actually, I'm a pretty cool god now, and I could just be like, what are you up to? And I don't have to bother about ruling crap. I can still look cool. I like that.
That's kind of cool. And then following on that skeletal theme, again, I sort of mentioned this militia, the bone warriors, who dress up in sort of skeletal armor, which has all the immunities and resistances of skeletons in the Planescape setting, but none of the disadvantages. So terribly frightening, I think, just that look at these skeletons with a person underneath. Just very, very cool.
Yeah, the bone warriors, which there is 1,000 at each time, is it? 1,000 bone warriors exist at each time. It's another cool goth place to go to.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've got then the Death of Innocence, which I sort of mentioned before, this idea of a really interesting and I think a cool place to put your players, this idea of a town that sort of like is trying to protect itself. I mean, for me the description of it wasn't I mean, I didn't really take to the description, but the idea that this female leader who doubts herself and quite a lot of stuff, because of her emotions, she's so connected and deep in that emotion, it affects the whole town, and that's why there's not this drainage from the plane.
Because she still retains this very strong emotion which hasn't been able to be drained from her, which is what is the last thing to get. Yeah, so
and you have this story about like this other person, Kirsten, who comes and keeps his friend hopeful and has weekly shipments of colour, like for fabric. Yeah. But then at the end he said, "Oh, he might not come with the next shipment, and what does that mean?" And there's all these other bits and pieces, and I was like, that's quite a cool thing to put in any town that has effectively, it doesn't have to be Death of Innocence, which I thought from the title of it, I thought it was going to be maybe a little bit more in a sense of like people are going to be like, I did this and now I'm a murderer and stuff, which is, it's not this town at all. That's a slightly different one further away. But yeah,
I totally agree. It had a really cool name and didn't live up to it as much. But as you said, it's a good place for like a respite, and you could add to it as well. You could make it your
that's
own.
What I thought. Yeah, it seemed like a perfect way to jump in, perhaps, and you're like, oh god, what is this place? And then finally, just on this plane, Hell's Domain.
Is it Niflheim?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also,
we are so bad at pronunciation. Just give us a guide, please.
Yeah, just give us a line. Yeah, we're terrible. We're English. We don't even speak our own language well enough. So
no.
But
exactly.
Hell's Domain, Niflheim. She watches the dead over this realm, and this is the thing. Like, it takes a while to get there. Yeah, fine. I get it. It's hard enough.
It's all very similar stuff. Yeah, and a lot of it you might know from reading other stories. So I think there's some particular.
And the same with Hell as well, and the same with Hades as well. But this idea that it's just a grand sort of banquet hall with rows and rows and rows of people sitting there. The picture is so good.
Show the image now, JR. Yeah.
And these people just sat on these amazing rows of the food that is decaying, and there's poison dripping from the roofs, and of course they're not eating because they don't want to eat, and they get too hungry.
Is dripping, and she sits at the head of the table just watching them, like,
and then
fucked up.
And then they get so hungry that they eat, and then they're sick and they die, and then the next day they're back in the same position. What a punishment!
It's like I hated Isgard as it was, but this is worse. I'd rather be in Isgard. But I mean, and the people that end up there, I find, and it annoys me still, because it still annoys me with the whole bloody Isgard thing, is that they might have been really good at battle, that they didn't die heroically, therefore they end up here. And you're like, that's not what bullshit is this? I'm sorry.
Bullshit.
They were good at their job, and therefore they get a punishment. I don't know.
I know. It feels like you can't do anything good, and you'll get a nice.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always one or the other. It's again fascinating. The final thing I'll say about this is this. Again, I don't really talk too much about proxies, but this proxy, the idea of a woman called Ingrid that has a dragon tattoo, and it turns out the proxy is the tattoo.
Yes.
And then obviously, I thought, dragons. There's Hamilton. This idea, this dragon comes out tearing this person apart with swaths of skin still left on it as it goes about and does this stuff. And this person, Ingrid, is left bloody and dead, lifeless on the floor until it comes back. So almost like a two-parter. And I think I would love to use something like that in other campaigns. I do want to
talk about the other proxy of Hell, because it just literally, which is the one that's earlier in the book, which is Eureka the Bloody, who serves Hell's interests outside of the Power's realm. She's short-tempered. She firmly believes in death, but her most prominent feature are her hands, which drip with the blood of all of her victims when she's angry. And it's not uncommon to see her clench her fists so tight that an arterial spray seems to burst from them. I was like, that is gothic horror. Like, she literally just goes, why? And there's the blood just goes. You just like, it's that gore, the stupid gore movies where they're just blood like spurting everywhere. Just what it makes me think of, these like stupid. It seemed kind of stupid. It became like sort of humorous because it's just like rah, it's like anime blood. I don't know, it's just kind of silly, but
I love it.
Also quite dark. I mean, just dripping with all this blood. Like, is it Carrie?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yeah. The blood comes all over her. It's terrible.
Yeah.
And then finally,
this is the horror realm. This is the shadow
horror.
realm.
Yeah.
What is it? It's the sort of the Van Richten's before Van Richten's.
Yeah, it's like the domains of dread. Absolutely. Yeah. This definitely has that feel on it. Finally, quickly, because I know we're running out of time. The final place, Hades, the final sort of realm, is underworld. So obviously if you know the stuff about Hades before, again, there you got the wife Persephone, who could help you if you were trying to say, can I have a loved one back? If you're nice to her, if you bring her news of the other realm, she might intervene and help. Yeah. Again, like I said, you've got this these different.
My friend names their iPhone Persephone.
Really? I like
really appreciate that. I saw that when I was in the car and it came up on the Bluetooth, and I was like,
that's so cute.
That's respect for that.
Sure.
And
then and it's just that's quite interesting. But obviously, if you do anything to help people, it just you get warnings. You almost 3 strikes,
and you're dead. Literally.
And then, like as I was saying before, quickly the Hill of Bones. So this idea, cool. And I will say, like, it's so cool. And I think as well, there's the Hill of Bone and there's Corpus, both of them. If you look above, they are different shapes, right? They talk about sorry, words are not. So the Hill of Bone. This idea, if you look at it from above, it is the skeleton shape of a horse which slowly moves in places, and this idea that it's like it maybe have its head raised back, sort of neighing, its legs are moving, that sort of thing. But it's an idea of when the nightmares, these horse skeleton, like death horses, sort of come to die, but then also rebirth and re-come back and stuff like that. But the cool thing about it, Hamilton, and I was like, I'm in. If somebody steals a bone, no matter how small, the sort of ever-present sort of skulls will notice. And then as soon as another nightmare comes to die, the skulls will be like, wait. And then they'll come
super grasses, absolute grasses.
And then form a picture of the person that stole the thing. And I was like, oh, that's right. And then obviously the nightmare will go out and hunt them and won't stop.
It will gather until any nightmare it can, and they will all gather and it will continue its quest until it dies, or three of them die in the process of doing it. So if you're the person that stole it, you have to kill basically three of them before you can stop it happening till they find you, and then they give up the chant for it. But also, grasses for the Americans means snitch, or someone who grasses is it a Cockney rhyming grasser? I don't know.
Snitch? No, grass. Yeah, I don't know.
Grass leaf? No, I don't think that's what it is. I don't know what it is.
Thief.
That's a thief. A leaf is a thief, isn't it?
A leaf is a thief,
amber and something like that. I can't remember.
Who knows?
I can't remember all my Cockney rhyme. Anyway,
we can't even do our pronunciation. We can't do our Cockney rhyming.
Well, we can at least translate the fact that grasser is a snitch.
No, I appreciate it. But
and then corpus, the living corpse of. Nope. It's
horrible place.
The shape of a person.
Yep.
It has a head, which is where all the things come from, the ideas and its municipality, and then it's got the stomach where all the cattle graze, and it's all for the function of this living being, which is actually a being in some ways. It kind of says it's very weird.
It made me think of, and again, forgive me, I can't remember the artist's name, but there is a person that draws pictures of people made up of fruit.
Oh yes,
and muscles like that, and that's what exactly, and that's what it makes me think of. Is that every person makes up something, and you like you said, like the heart is the one that spends currency, and it goes along veins, which are the streets, and it's like you could be there are faces that appear out of the walls.
Oh, when there's a disease, it has disease. Like it talks about when
buildings disconnecting and going to fight the infection, and you're like, so that's like white cells,
blood cells. Yeah, exactly.
Horrible. This idea that suddenly this building of made up
building
people
is a white blood cell. Yeah,
comes up and tries to get them. You could, he says, it's quite a privilege to be like a paving stone in a street, and you're like, is it? But then you look at like people's bodies being twisted to be almost like support beams for buildings, and the reason people would want to visit is maybe to protect them from the that sickness, that draining stuff, and they're like, you can come. You just got to serve 5 years in this town. And of course, once you're in, it's very hard to get out. And I love this. Again, at the end of all these realms and stuff, they talk about chant and rumours and stuff. And there's two things. One, there's that Corpus is maybe readying itself to get up and go somewhere, which is
go for a walk.
Horrible sounding thing. Like it's like gigantic town of people.
Yeah,
moving.
Exactly. Just moving. Yeah, exactly. Not a fan.
On top of that, you have the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain possibly warring against us and not approving of each other's actions, which could tear the town apart. So I don't know which one of those is worse, to be honest with you.
I don't know either.
So, but again, you can have a lot of fun. Again, it's very body horror-esque, but you can have a lot of fun in talking about it with your players. And like, if they need to stay there for a night because of the sickness and stuff, and they're like, they're making that choice. Is somebody that they've been looking for, have they been absorbed into this town? Do they need to go bust them out? Like,
yeah, there's a lot of that happening. There's a lot of like needing to bust people out of places, isn't there? Really, like, a lot of just people being captured by horrible things.
Yeah,
and experiences. It's not fun. Is that everything?
The last thing I wanted to quickly talk about, because we talked about so much, and I think there's so much in these layers that you can do. I want to quickly talk about the magical conditions.
Yeah. Go for it.
So in terms of magical conditions, spells that are always, well, if you are a spellcaster or a spell slinger, as it talks about this, you will have to be aware that any spell you cast will have the most evil effect, which I think is great. Colour-based spells, such as Colour Spray and Prismatic Sphere, are utterly ineffective, which I would love to use, actually. I think that's a really cool little line. Again, very similar things. The interesting one is enchantment and charming. So people have a save to it because of, it is like tearing someone else out of the influence of the plane to your own influence, right? So as soon as they snap out of the plane's influence, if they don't make the save, they're like very grateful and they'll come back to their senses. But as soon as the charm wears off, depending on the duration, they'll get angry and they'll possibly fight you, probably, depending, because they don't like this being discretized. But then that still keeps them immune from the plane's effect for at least another week before slowly but surely they come back into it, and it just adds more and more to it. And I just thought that was a really cool thing. If you're trying to get someone away, you might be
charming. You could charm your friends as well as a way to sort of like help manage it, maybe.
But again, that's something I put in session 0. Like, I know people don't like necessarily emotional manipulation of player characters and stuff, but I just like for this, it might be desperate. You might be having to, what if people can't be convinced?
Because that is the effect. It's being your emotion is being affected, so you're having to manipulate the emotion that's being manipulated. I don't know, it's a bit complicated, too quick to think about it now, so I think you're right, it is something to talk about. I think it's worth noting on those things, if you're in AE, which is a hard thing to say, which is Hecate, the mystery magic of evil. Mainly there, magic, most of the magic effects are completely ignored, apart from their own personal feeling at the time. So if they're feeling a bit angry, then you might be able to do any spell you like, but it's very aggressive, but it will be cast at full power. So you can fireball and it's, full dice roll. But sometimes if they're feeling a bit down, maybe it won't be so flashy and you might be able to get away with other things instead. Absolutely. But it was kind of interesting to know.
I think that that is the one difference out of the whole of the rest of the plane. The final thing I will mention is the optional rule, as always, from the 5th edition.
Yes.
This is the transforming into a larvae threat, essentially, because it doesn't mention this in the Planescape one. So this idea, at the end of each long rest taken on the plane, the visitor must make a DC 10 Wisdom saving throw. So again, not very high, but on a failed save, you gain 1 level of exhaustion, which can't be removed whilst you're in Hades or the Grey Wastes. If you get 6 levels of exhaustion, you don't die. Instead, you turn permanently into a larvae, whereupon all the levels of exhaustion are removed, and that is it. So that is, the clock is running. You're going against time. You need to get out. It's in and out, because it's not a high saving throw. But what if you're having all these other effects on it? Maybe because you've got the Shadowfell Despair thing as well. You could use as well. So yeah, all those things on top of that.
Not nice. Not nice at all.
What a plane.
Not a nice plane.
What a one to end on. I was just saying to you, I think it was such an interesting one that I was, yes, doom and gloom, fine, but I think you can have a real play around with the features of it. And well, here it is. We're at the end, Hamilton. Yeah. Thank you so much for what a ride. What a ride. We've done it.
100%. And I think it's definitely one of the top interesting ones out there, I'd say. I think we definitely have to do some sort of like review in time of like what ones we like the most, I think, and what are interesting things, and sort of take an overview, because it'd be good to do that.
I think so.
But I think our journey hasn't completely finished yet, has it?
No, it hasn't.
No.
We thought, whilst we've done all the 16 planes, there is one as a slight outlier that we thought we should end on properly. So yes, next time in the final episode of this series, I will say, we're going to the Outlands and we're going to Sigil. Or Sigil, depending on where you're from. It is the plane of concordant opposition, incorporating a little bit of everything and keeping all aspects in a paradoxical balance. So very, very excited.
Sigil, the City of Doors.
City of Doors.
And home to, also known as the Cage, and home to all the factions, the Lady of Pain, and basically the route. You think this area was the Glitter Hell was the customs. This is the airport. The international transitional airport of the planes, basically. Absolutely. So yeah, it's a great place to go.
So come and join us for that one. But until then, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and catch up on previous episodes and VODs of our sibling podcast, the DM's Book Club, and you can see probably some links happening all around the screen as usual.
Use the QR code.
Use the QR code. That's just that. Who knows if that will be actually seen? But yes, and thank you so much for joining us for this adventure, and we will see you next time.
See you on the flip side.
See you on the flip side.
Bye.
Bye.